now. Okay, so my goal today is really to have you guys practice as much as possible and me not talk very much. Now, when I teach this material, that's a little bit of a challenge for me these days because I've got so much background on remote viewing. And also, I feel like I do have a responsibility to those that have come before me and who it is so important to clearly explain what remote viewing is and what it is not in the tradition that it's taught. So I want to make sure that I emphasize the difference between remote viewing and other type of psychic work, even though there are many people who don't really, understand the context in which the word remote viewing came from, and so they'll use it interchangeably with other psychic modalities. But for those that came from the tradition of where the term remote viewing comes from, they get very upset if anyone just uses it like, oh, I was laying in bed and I suddenly got a vision and that was remote viewing. They would say, no, that's not remote viewing. That may be clairvoyance, your other psychic abilities, but that's not remote viewing. And people who are haven't really studied this are like, well, why isn't that remote viewing? So when you get a vision is clairvoyance, but remote viewing is a term that has been attributed to Ingo Swann, who Ingo was a psychic. He grew up as a child, very psychic. He went on to be a practicing psychic, and he was very intellectual as well and very interested in research. And he, in the 60s and 70s, he was oftentimes a subject in various scientific studies. And he found his way into the Stanford Research Institute and helped them really through being a psychic who also, after being in several studies, he started to get bored with the traditional psychic work at the time in labs, which oftentimes were what's called forced choice experiments. A forced choice experiment, and this is good for you to know, even though it's not so much about remote viewing, but it is about parapsychology, is using Zener cards, which were developed by Dr. Rhine, who went on to found the Rhine Research Institute. So Zener cards are also called ESP cards. And so they used to do a lot of these really pretty boring experiments with these cards where, maybe occasionally a psychic liked them for a little bit, but where they would just sit there and be told, okay, tell us which card is going to come up next. So there were a lot of and it could be one of 5 symbols, and you're going to do this like 50 times, 100 times, and we'll see how you do. So he got bored of that and started to tell the researchers, I think that I could do more than this. And so he suggested that, and while I'm talking here, I'm going to just run to my computer cord and plug it in so I don't get disconnected. You know what? Hang on, you guys. It's across the house. I'm very sorry. I'm going to be right back. Okay, hang on. I don't want to lose anyone. Just one more minute. Okay, great. So got you plugged in there. Sorry about that. So Ingo Swann said to the researchers, and at this time, these researchers were primarily Russell Targ and Harold Pudoff, who went on to write some great books that I recommend. And let me just get my PowerPoint presentation back up here. So they wrote some books, and one of them I would highly recommend, Mind Reach by Russell Targ, is a classic. And you could really learn a whole lot about psychic research, the early days of remote viewing. So Ingo said, psychics can do more than these boring experiments. And I want you guys to see what I can do. So he told them that he wanted them to go somewhere outside, just pick a spot anywhere in the Northern California area where they were, and he would describe where they were. And he did this very well, and he continued to do this. And so they discovered that not only could he do this, but other psychics could do this as well, including one. Her name was Hella Hammond. She was just a friend of the researcher, and they brought her in precisely because she seemed like she was someone who was not psychic at all, even though she was an artist. And it turns out that artists make excellent remote viewers because they can really describe well through sketches what they're looking at in the physical world. So they discovered that, yes, psychics could do this, and it wasn't hard whatsoever. And so they started a massive research endeavor and at the Stanford Research Institute. And they went on to work in this way, having both psychics and just regular people come in and describe. These were called outbounder experiments because they would send a person out to a remote location, and the people would describe what was the location around the person. Initially, they thought that another person had to be out there, that they thought there had to be a telepathic connection. And so that's why they would send a person out, and the remote viewer would describe what that person was. It wasn't supposed to be about reading the person, but sometimes they'd see the actions of the person, like he's walking across a bridge and now he's standing reading a sign and things like that. So it was very much about the physical world. The U.S. government at the time was helping to finance the Stanford Research Institute. And this was around the time of the Cold War between Russia and the U.S., and they became aware that Russia had a psychic spy program. And so the U.S. government very much wanted to understand, or at least some people within the government, not all of them by any means, but a small portion of the government wanted to know, what could the psychics in Russia really do? Like, what information could they get? And since they weren't being told that by anyone in Russia, they decided they would institute their own program and be able to learn about what they could do. And so they hired the Stanford Research Institute to be the research area. And they eventually hired Ingo Swann as a contractor to come in and train the personnel. So Ingo Swann has been credited with calling what he did remote viewing. Although in many ways, remote viewing really is a bit of a misnomer. It really should be called remote sensing. And that is a term that some people will use, remote sensing. And I'd say it's really a better word just because it does involve all of your different senses, your ability to hear and smell and feel, and all of that good stuff that you all know that we use in clairvoyant reading. But so he came up with the term remote viewing, and then he needed, because he was training people in the military, and they used a variety. They did have some civilians, but they found pretty quickly that because they needed to have the viewers um, do all sorts of military, highly classified military targets. They really needed people with high classification and also skills with a knowledge of the subject matter. If you're going to send someone to use their psychic skills to examine what's going on at a foreign military base, then it's very helpful to have the person doing it who could identify weapons and airplanes and vehicles and all sorts of things like that, which people who aren't in the military or are familiar with aircraft and weapons, aren't going to be able to do. So it makes sense that they would want to hire people that already had this knowledge, and so they looked for people that weren't calling themselves psychics, but who had given some kind of indication of at least having a psychic experience earlier on in life, like maybe a near-death experience or something like that. And so then Ingo, he was tasked with training them. And while he wasn't trained himself very much beyond just picking things up over the years, he he had to put together a structured program. And essentially what he and some other researchers did was what you could call reverse engineering what Ingo did. He had some very, very strong successes that got the attention of lots of people in the government, particularly when he described the rings on Saturn before a satellite, months before a satellite brought in information to confirm what he had done. He also was able to have an influence on mechanical equipment. So not only was he able to tune in on a clairvoyant level, but he was also able to impact physical machinery that nobody should have been able to do. And because of that, they were very interested in him. And so he had this great task to train people, but he had to do it in an organized manner. And lots of people were curious about how he did what he did. So he essentially reverse engineered what he did that seemed to be effective in his session. And then he started reverse engineering by really examining what he did, putting it on paper, and coming up with the system. The system was initially called coordinate remote viewing. And this is where it's important to share this just so you understand what methodologies are out there. And also there's a couple aspects of this that will help as you go along, because you guys are going to be getting what's called a target number. A target number is essentially like someone's name. If you want to read me, you tune into me by saying my name. And in clairvoyant reading, one of the big differences is the subject matter and the manner in which remote viewing versus, let's say, clairvoyant reading is done. If you want to read me, I'm a person, obviously. If I say myself and most people that get readings, we want to be read. So we're soliciting the psychic to read us. The psychic knows that they're reading us. They know the subject matter, and they can tune into our names. Or say psychics that work with psychometry, they'll have you give you an object and tune in that way. So that would be psychic reading. But in remote viewing, a lot of times the remote viewers are blind. They're working blind. And this comes from the tradition of the research lab. Because if you're going to early on, and I have to say most of parapsychology has been about proving that people are actually being psychic. As these days now, researchers are really trying to move past that, and rather than just proving that people are psychic, they're trying to start really learning more about it. But for years, it was more about proving that you're psychic. And so because of that, psychics in the research lab had to work blind. That means they couldn't know anything about their subject matter. In fact, they may not know if they were reading a person or a location or an object, or they had no idea. So how do you get a person where you want to make use of their psychic information, but they can't have any idea of what the subject matter is? They're working completely blind. And this was, by the way, not just because of it was research and it was testing them, but it was also in the military. It was oftentimes about levels of classification where they weren't, so the military personnel weren't all always supposed to know about what it was they were looking at. So you have these two cases where you have people involved in research projects or people that are doing assignments on the job within the remote viewing military unit, and people want information from them. They want as much detailed information on a psychic level as possible. However, they don't want the psychics slash remote viewers. They couldn't call them psychics because that's not a very professional sounding word, and they had to be very concerned about that in both environments. But they called them remote viewers, and they didn't want the remote viewers to know everything. Just they wanted them to provide the information, but not get the secrets. So how would they? And that wasn't always the case. Sometimes in both situations, they had an idea of what they were going to be looking at, but many times not. So how did they deal with that? Well, to task them, tasking is when you give someone an assignment to go look at something psychically. They task them with a target number. So what were those target numbers? Well, early on, they were coordinates. They were longitude and latitude coordinates within the military. So they could say, here's the longitude, latitude coordinate. We want you to tune into this exact coordinate and tell us what's going on at the location. And they would, and they'd say, they'd end up describing a submarine if that's what was there, or, a certain kind of outpost or building or something like that. And of course, they started out training them, giving them targets coordinates where they knew exactly what was there. And then as they progressed, they gave them targets where they didn't know what was there, and was able to get intelligence back many times to confirm what the psychics were saying. And so this became helpful. And then their information was passed through the different departments, department, the DIA, the CIA, the FBI. All those departments were making use of the military remote viewers' information. Although there was still a lot of resistance to that. The military remote viewing programs went on for approximately 20 years. I think exactly 20 years. And then they were disbanded, defunded, and declassified. Those several of the people in the military unit and research unit, and I say several, but really there weren't that many throughout the course of the entire program. But still, so I should say more, a few of those went, and they formed the International Remote Viewing Association, which is a active association today. Some went out to start their own training programs or companies, and a couple such as Lynn Buchanan and Paul Smith both continue to teach today. And so these are the people that I've been working with closely, training with, doing different projects with. I'm learning from, communicating with, doing research with for the past, I'd say, a good 7 years now or so. And been very actively involved in the present day remote viewing communities. This is a very different community than the psychic, what you can think of as the new age communities or psychic intuitive communities. Very different mindset, tends to be primarily men involved, tends to be a lot more control. I mean, they're a super wonderful group of people, and particularly the current generation of remote viewers, I'd say they're, a lot more relaxed. But traditionally, it's been the remote viewers, just because of the where the whole thing came out of, the research lab and military. You just have a lot of different people than you would find in the new age community, and they have a whole different language as far as what they say that they do. They're not talking in spiritual terms. They're not going to talk about God or their soul or things like that. They might do in their personal life, but in public, they're talking about the subconscious. They're using words like non-local perception, anomalous cognition, instead of, intuition and psychic and things like that. So getting back to the methodology that Ingo Swann was teaching and that they were using, initially the method was called coordinate remote viewing because of the longitude latitude coordinates. However, after a while, the psychics were becoming, or I should say the remote viewers, they were becoming too familiar with the longitude latitude coordinates. They started to be able to tell which region of the world that they were being tasked with describing. And so they had to come up with another way to task remote viewers. And what they realized was they really could use any number. They didn't need to use the longitude, latitude coordinates. They could just take a random number, and the researcher or project manager would take the number on a piece of paper. He might put it in an envelope, but he'd write whatever the secret tasking was. Like, say they wanted remote viewers to describe the capital of Russia, the Capitol building. So that's the target. And then they would write just get a random number, come up with any number. It could be computer generated. It could just be, for example, if I wanted you guys to describe the capital of Russia, I could just come up with a number out of my head. Let's say 923,781. I just made that up, totally made it up. I'm going to write that on a piece of paper. I'm going to say this number is paired with this concept, which is I'm saying concept, but it is an actual location, the Capitol building of Russia. I'd put that on a piece of paper or on my computer. And in fact, I'll be doing something very similar in just a few minutes. So I'll pair that target number with that. And then for you guys, I would just give you the target number. And I could just say, here's a target number. Bring your attention to that location, describe that location in detail. Describe it, sketch it, get your report back to me. And this is essentially how remote viewing works. They found then that it works, and many of us over the years have found that works just fine. There are some things to be aware of that I won't get into now just because there's so much information here. But for the most part, that idea works, that you can pair any string of numbers or letters. Numbers are great because there tends to be less meaning coming from them than, if I gave you a word. And you can do that with front loading or without. So front loading is where there is some idea of what it is that you're describing, for example, but not very much. So, for example, well, there could be extreme detail, or there could just be just a little bit. What's considered acceptable front loading in remote viewing is to be told the target is a location, describe the location, or a target is a simple object, describe the object, or the target is a person, describe the person. Those are considered acceptable. It's not giving you too much information. It's helping to narrow your focus. And for many of us, like for example, if someone wants me to describe a location, then I would like to know that as opposed to if it's a simple object, because my approach is going to be different. My approach will be very different if I'm describing a simple sketch. Let's say someone sketched something and they want me to come up with a copy of that sketch as much as I can, but it doesn't exist in real space and time. It's just on a piece of paper. My approach to that is going to be very different than my approach to describing a real physical location out from somewhere. In the same way that my approach will be different if someone says, "Hey, I'm having a hard time in my relationship. Will you tell me about my relationship?" For a question like that, I'm not going to do what I'd call remote viewing. I'm going to do a clairvoyant reading in the same way that I've taught you guys how to do relationship readings. That's very different. So there's different methodologies, and because of that, it is helpful to have some idea of what it is that you're viewing. However, again, there's going to be circumstances where people just want to give you a target number, not give you any front loading, and just say, trust me on this. Now, if that's the case, it is helpful to know who that person is. Why are they wanting you to do a remote viewing session? And again, they may not want to tell you, and it may be a good idea for you to not know initially, depending on what their project is. But then you want to find out, is this like a valid project manager? Do they know what they're doing? Or is this just some silly person that their brother says he doesn't believe in remote viewing, and he wants to, find psychics or remote viewers to describe things to prove that they're really psychic. So you want to, this is a challenge where a lot of times, for example, someone got in touch with me and said that he wanted me to help describe where a treasure was buried. And I understood. Now, in this case, I knew what the subject matter was. So that's actually considered a lot of front loading in remote viewing, to be told that you're looking for a buried treasure. That's a lot more information than most remote viewers would even want starting out. But in this case, I needed some information, so I wasn't going to waste my time and be on a wild goose chase. But I found out that this actually is a valid project. So I'm just saying this because as you guys go forward, especially if you continue in the subject of remote viewing, you may there's several different online forums, Facebook groups where you can learn a lot. There's a lot of free information out there in groups doing things. And you just want to, because you can't many times know the nature of the project right away, you want to just make sure you're working for valid people. And if you're ever invited to do a project and you're not sure if it's something that you should do, then just feel free always to email me whether or not you're still training with me. And that's really true with any subject matter. I might not have time to give you like a huge in-depth answer, but I'll always do everything I can to point you in the right direction and give you some quick advice. And that offer, stands indefinitely, as long as I'm around to, respond to you. So that being said, today you are going to not do there are a few different methodologies within remote viewing and then different variations of them. I'm not going to be teaching you those today. We do cover those in my 12-week class, but obviously we're limited. The interesting thing about remote viewing is that there is, it can be as simple as closing your eyes and the information appears and starts to flow in. It could be that simple. Or it could be extremely complex, taking hours and hours of time doing a session. It really depends what the end goal is. And so I just want to quickly talk about the uses. Now, I've already talked a little bit about the difference in philosophy and society. The difference between clairvoyant reading and remote viewing is really the subject matter and some of the methodologies. Now, there is a lot of crossover. For example, when you are reading somebody, the person has a body, obviously. So there's a physical component of a person that could be looked at. And in the same way, if someone's standing at a location, say you're remote viewing a location, there's people there. Well, you can tune into the people and what they're thinking and how they're feeling. You can really merge with the person and get a lot of information. So there's crossover between both. But again, with clairvoyant reading, it's more the person is asking for a reading information. I'd say one of the biggest differences is that in clairvoyant reading, a lot of times you're working with symbols. You have to use symbols because there's not all physical components. The person has the body, which is the physical component. Maybe the person lives in a house. Well, sure, they live in a house, they live in a structure. So if anyone has questions about where they're living, where they're going to live, that can be tuned into in the same way that that remote viewing is. Um, but as you've already seen in clairvoyant reading, there's a lot of conceptuals. um, what is my life path? Why am I feeling sad? What do I need to do to be successful? What is my personality like? These are all going to be conceptuals and requiring the use of symbols. Whereas in remote viewing, which is more focused on the physical, although you can pick up on conceptuals, but you really want to pick up on the conceptuals are really kind of just like frosting on a cake or gravy on a turkey. You go to a location. If someone wants to know about a location, most of the time they're going to want you to describe the physicality of it first. There is going to be conceptual at a location. If you're tasked with describing turns out to be a church, or you discover it's a church, the person tasking you with it, probably either knew it was a church or wanted to know what was in that physical space. But the idea that there's religious and spiritual components, that is conceptual, or let's say historical. The church has been there for many years. It's got a rich history. Or let's say there's a battlefield. There's no longer a battle going on there, but the concepts that there were battles there. There were high emotions. There were people that died. That's all conceptual. So that is important about a location. But that most of the time, if that's all you're getting, that's not enough. There's a physicality to a location. There's objects there. There's structures there. Whether they're man-made or it's a natural environment. those are what's important first. And in order to get those, many times some different techniques can be used. They don't not It's not that your clairvoyant reading skills that you've already gotten aren't sufficient. Many times they're sufficient enough if you but there are techniques that you can do to direct yourself. Just like in clairvoyant reading, you guys have learned how to direct yourself. You can think of it, um, every psychic method, I would say, has two components. First, there is tuning in to get the initial information. How do you even start the flow of psychic information? Sometimes it doesn't take much. You just say, I want to tune in, and you just do, and the information's right there, and you didn't really have to do anything. But as you've already seen, sometimes it's not right there, and it's very helpful to have a way to get the flow started. Once it's started, though, what else do you do? In clairvoyant reading, you've learned you have the flower, where once you see the flower, you start to probe different aspects, or with the body or aura that we've worked on in clairvoyant reading, you start to hone in on colors and different symbols, and you probe them and get more. Well, it's a similar concept with the various remote viewing methodologies. Once you get something, you need to know how to navigate your way around. And that's where the methodologies come in. Also, there's a difference between, in clairvoyant reading, as you've seen, a lot of it is a verbal method. We've met on the telephone. You didn't have to write anything down. You could write things down. You could do email readings. You can record things. But for the most part, you can just speak directly to someone because, again, they're asking for the reading. But in remote viewing, if you're describing a physical location, there's only so words are helpful and important, but so is sketching, because many times your mind is going to come up. You're going to get shapes, you're going to get images, and when you sketch them, both when you sketch them, a couple things are going to happen. One is you're doing your best to take what you saw and to translate in its truest form. But the other thing is that your what could either be called, I call it body intelligence, and more just really this year I've heard the term kinesthetic. Kinesthetic is more of a term that comes out of hypnotherapy or NLP. It may have originated elsewhere. It's just starting to show up in remote viewing terminology, and that's really, as far as I can ascertain, the same word that it could be used interchangeably with what I call body intelligence, or what hypnotherapists call an automatic response. The body, and one might say it's the subconscious that is communicating, and it can communicate through the written form, particularly through sketching. So, for example, I might get an image of a rectangular structure. I might see a rectangular structure, and I could use the words rectangular. I can sketch them on my paper, or I could sketch that shape on my paper, which I always highly recommend. And this is part of coordinate remote viewing methodology, which I forgot to say, is when they did away with the coordinates and went to just random target numbers. The terminology was for the training that Ingo Swann did was, instead of coordinate remote viewing, it was now called controlled remote viewing. And he used the word controlled because it used a specific methodology that one needed to do step by step. This is not the methodology that we'll be covering today. However, we will be borrowing some of the main concepts from that methodology, concepts that I believe are important to know. The knowing the step-by-step methodology is not so important, although it can be helpful. But at least some of the main components are very valuable, and that's what we'll be covering today. But so as far as the idea of my example I was giving of let's say I have a target, I am seeing I get a vision of something of a rectangular structure, and maybe I feel like it's or I'm seeing what looks like a pattern, like a brick pattern. Well, I could write on my paper rectangular structure, man-made brick. But it's very valuable to sketch that rectangular shape for a couple different reasons. One is as I sketch it, my automatic response, my kinesthetic body intelligence response, may have me just spontaneously sketch, let's say, a rectangular shape on top. It may have me sketch the rectangular shape leaning over to the right. I may start to sketch something around it or in it that I did not see, but that my body wanted to sketch. This is where oftentimes when you're using a written methodology, you really are bypassing your conscious mind. Now, one might say, well, all psychic information is bypassing the conscious mind. It is when it first comes in, but in the case of where there's a rectangular building and I see an image of it, even if it's just a quick flash and I'm barely sure I perceived it, as you guys have seen now, some of your visuals in clairvoyant reading will be very clear. It'll almost kind of linger there. A lot of it just comes in so quickly that you are barely sure that you even saw it. So that is often times the case in remote viewing too. So, but at the point where I say, oh, I saw something rectangular, I am conscious of I'm having a visual of something rectangular. So that's more conscious. But if my hand wants to sketch a rectangular top to it, because in fact there is a rectangular rooftop. I find out later I didn't see that, but there's a part of me subconsciously that knows that has that intelligence, and that ability can emerge when you're doing when you're writing. Now that subconscious knowing can just emerge when you're doing a clairvoyant reading. And I would say how that emerges is where you may find yourself saying something and you're like, why am I saying this? Because I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. I didn't even feel it. Just all of a sudden I'm saying something. I didn't even have an instant knowing. Like there's a difference when you, after you experience these, you'll understand. If you guys haven't experienced all of this yet, just keep practicing. And in terms of your clairvoyant reading, I'm talking about right now, as far as there's even a difference between instant knowing, where suddenly you just know that you knew something, versus you don't even have that, but you're just going along talking and suddenly you find yourself saying something and you're like, why the heck am I saying this? It's because a deeper part of you knows it, in the same way that a deeper part of you has you sketched something. So for that reason, sketching is very important. For another reason is that many times you may have, and this is a very important thing I'm about to say here in remote viewing, is a lot of times you may have analytic overlay. That's another word of saying that you're misinterpreting what it is that you're either looking at, in the case of if you're getting a visual, or sometimes analytic overlay happens subconsciously. So you're not even getting an image yet and misinterpreting it. Your mind is just giving you a false picture. If analytic overlay is involved, the false picture will contain truths, but it will not be that. For example, last week, well, you know what? I don't want to give you an example from last week because you guys may want to watch the recording and do the target from last week. So let me see. I can give you another example. Let's say you just suddenly think of you get a picture of a concert hall that, let's say, a rock concert that you attended. Well, you think, okay, the target is taking place at a rock concert or a band performance, and you just saw an image of like the concert hall and someone on stage that was a musician that you've seen before. Well, it's very possible that that's not correct. It could be correct, but it's very possible that your mind just automatically gave you something that was familiar, and that's going to be wrong even though you saw it. But what will be correct is that there is a gathering, there's a large group of people, there's a group of people in the audience, there's a group of people perhaps on a stage, or maybe they're not even on a stage like you saw, but there's a group of people that are doing an activity and a group of people that are watching the activity. Maybe the people watching the activity admire the people doing the activity. Maybe there is music involved, or somebody communicating something involved. But that's the extent of the match. So that would be a case of where your mind automatically generated a picture of it, and that's considered analytic overlay. That is a problem in remote viewing. Essentially, your mind gave you a symbol. Now, it's very easy to mistake your symbols for the literal. So this is something that can happen. It doesn't always, but it can, and there's ways to work with it to minimize it in a session. There's so far, no one's really found a way to completely get rid of it. But there are ways so that by the time you do a session and turn it into someone, if it really matters, that your session could be quite clear of these, even though you may still have gotten over analytic overlay in your mind. There's a way to do the session, to format it, to summarize it, so by the time you turn it into somebody, you have very little analytic overlay. I will speak more about this subject later on, but just know that part of the written methodology of controlled remote viewing involves how you put the information on your paper, how you organize your paper, and all of that process is done to minimize analytic overlay. Initially, there's usually going to be a lot in a session. What I can say about that is when you're doing a session, you want to be able to describe. Your job in a remote viewing session, and I'll write this down to emphasize this as we get close to doing a session now. Your job is to describe, sketch. I was laying in bed the other night and I heard these words. It was like someone was giving me direction, and I already knew this, but it was interesting that I heard these three words. The word was, let me see if I can remember it now. First, you watch, you listen, you watch, you listen, and you describe. It was interesting because the three words I heard were watch, listen, and describe. Now in remote viewing, you can use all your session and you can say, what do I hear? What do I feel? What do I taste? You can move around a location. You can move around in all directions. But I seem to get this message a few nights ago that watching and listening was very important as well, at least to me. Maybe I haven't been doing that enough in my remote viewing sessions. Not sure why that was emphasized in the message to me. But if you're watching, you're listening, you're describing, you're feeling, you're moving around, and then watching and describing some more. Every time you move around at a location or move around an object or feel different aspects, use all your abilities, you are going to get a whole new stream of information. This is not that different than when you're reading someone and saying using a flower and you look at one aspect and then you look at another and then you destroy the flower, create another flower. You go to the person's aura, you move your attention around, you do close-ups, you can see people close up or far away. It's the same thing in remote viewing. Move around, and when you move around, and then you stop and you observe and you watch and you listen and you feel. So if it's location, you can do movement commands. Movement commands using all your senses each time you move. And I'll direct you guys through this. So common ones are move 500 feet above and describe. You could describe look around you at 500 feet up or look down and describe. There's a difference. If you move 500 feet up in the sky, there's clouds. If you are up in the clouds and look down, you're going to get a whole other viewpoint than if you're just looking around you at 500 feet. So these distinctions can really matter. Although you may decide you're going to move 500 feet above and look down, that might be your intention, but as soon as you go up there, you notice something. Let's say, well, I won't give you this example because I might use it here, but you might move 500 feet up and discover there's birds up there. And then when you look down, you're going to see something totally different. What's on the ground? Move to ground level, base level. Move to base level. I move to base level instead of ground level because there might be water at the ground. So you never know. So base level is where your feet would normally go. That's a good place to always start. Move to base level and describe. Move 2 feet under base level. Now, a lot of times if base level is the ground and you move 2 feet under, you can't really move there because it's ground and you're going to know that. But what if there's water there? You're going to know that too. What if it's a canyon or a hole in the ground, something happening underground? You're going to, if you move 2 feet or 5 feet under base level, just to explore what's there, and suddenly you see offices and staircases and you realize, oh, there's an underground base there, or there's construction going on, or oh, I must be on a mountain because underneath me there's more land and rocks and things like that when I move to base level. So there's a lot of things that can happen when you do that. Move 5 feet forward. Move 300 meters backwards. And then you're going to watch, you're going to listen, you're going to feel. You can interact with your body. Feeling doesn't just have to be with your hands. You can jump up and down. You can hug things. I like to do that. let's say what will start to happen is you'll notice things there, and then you want to sketch them. Again, you move 300 meters backwards, you see something large in front of you, it's a certain shape. You want to sketch that shape. And I'll just show you a couple more things here, and we could get started with our first target. Let's say, I'm going to just pull out my tool, my drawing tool application here. Just one moment. Okay, so let's say I've been moving around a target, and as I'm going, I'm describing anything that you notice, you want to write down. Now, if you have a tape recorder, you can be just talking into your tape recorder and write it down later. And that's a good way to do it too, but it's really helpful to write things and to sketch things. So let's say I've written a bunch of things down, but I move 500 meters backwards or to the right. I'm having a sense of something triangular. So I sketch it. Well, now I have this kind of funny looking triangle, and now I can probe what I already got. I can use my paper now as a method, because and I can label this paper, and I'm just randomly choosing what I want to label it as, but 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, now I can put my attention on any one of these parts, and maybe I say, okay, I'm going to explore the top of this triangle. Now I'm going to do two things here if this is a location. I'm going to use the paper, and I'm going to put my pen right here, and I'm going to tap on it or trace the top of this, and this is going to give me information when I do this. I can also, even though I'm still working with the paper, I'm here in my house, I know I have my pen on my paper, I'm tapping it, but I'm allowing my consciousness to reach over to the location. Whatever is there that is triangular, I'm sending my attention over to the top of it. I may even imagine that I'm flying over to it, or I'm extending my my consciousness. I'm extending my soul. These are my remote viewers would use consciousness. They wouldn't say soul. They wouldn't say they're leaving their body. But I, Debra Katz, am saying I will do this, and I recommend that you guys do this because it works. You could say you're leaving your body and going over to the top of where this triangle is. So while your hand is tapping on or either tracing it, tapping on it, saying, I want to describe what's at the top, you can say you're leaving your body and going over to the top of the triangle. Or you could think of it that you don't have to travel anywhere. You can stay in your body and just extend yourself over there, and know that you can now be in two places at once. Your hand could be working with your paper, but a part of your consciousness, a part of your being is over at the top of that triangle. And what's going to happen? Oh, I just got a flash of yellow or gold, and I can write this down here, yellow or gold. And when I did this, I had a sense that I'm very high up and I can feel wind. There's wind blowing through my hair. And I just got like this, I just kind of had a circular, like a 360-degree view of the area. And it seems like there's desert off to the side, a desert area. So I'm going to write desert area up here. It's hard for me to write using this online program here, so excuse my writing. It's deserty over here, and it's yellow and gold and high up over here. Wow, I just got a lot of information. And I also know from what just happened, I got a 360-degree bird's eye view, and this is definitely a structure. So I put all this stuff down, and then I say, but you know what? I don't, what's down here at the bottom? I don't know what's at the bottom here. So how can I know? Well, I am going to go to the base, and I'm going to put this as number 5. I want to know what's here. So um, I'm going to put my pen here. I'm going to say I want any information that's here I want to know about, and I'm going to extend myself. There is actually a methodology, besides for controlled remote viewing, there were 2 methodologies that came out of the military. One was called, as I said, first coordinate, and then it became controlled remote viewing. Another methodology, which David Morehouse talks about in his book called The Psychic Warrior, which was, I believe, the very first book that came out when the programs were declassified. It's called extended remote viewing, and it's called extended because it's the idea that one can extend themselves over to a remote or separate location at a distance. Again, he wasn't thinking of it as leaving his body, but he was thinking of extending. Now, what would that be? That would almost be, I would think of it in terms that we've talked about with the aura, extending one's aura over to somewhere else. You can stretch your aura out. You don't have to go out of your body. You can just extend your field out and then feel and experience whatever is there. Now, again, never in a million years would David Morehouse have used the term aura, or would they have used that term in the military. But it was acceptable to say that they were extending their consciousnesses over to the location. I believe that what we're doing is extending what we call our auric field over there. So it works both ways as far as I'm concerned. We could leave our bodies and go over there, or we could extend ourselves in the same way we could reach our arms out and touch something further away. We could reach our fields out, and then we're going to pick up information. So going back to working with my sketch here to get more detail, I'm putting my pen on the paper. I'm working with the paper, but I'm going to extend myself over there. And as soon as I do that, wow, I get a sense of let's say water, or at least liquid, maybe a splash. When I go over there, suddenly I get a splash of something. Okay, well, there's liquid at the base. If there wasn't liquid, if there wasn't water at the top, I'm not going to get a splash in my face, but at the bottom there is. So this is really more of even what I'm talking in controlled remote viewing. This would be considered more of an advanced in the later stages of remote viewing, but we don't need, this is really, they consider that more advanced because in the methodology, there's a bunch of steps before that. But I'm giving you guys the shortcuts because essentially this really is all you need to know. But you start, if you first go to a location, initially you're going to get a whole bunch of impressions from all over the place. You're not going to be all that organized many times. I mean, sometimes you will. If you're, sometimes you'll go to a location and you'll just be moving around and seeing things exactly as they are in their places, and you'll get, oh, over there, there's on the ground, there's some water, and there's people over here, and there's people coming out of buildings. It's very possible to be seeing literally what's going on. But other times, you're not going to, that doesn't happen all the time. It's great when that happens, but a lot of times you're just going to get a whole bunch of disjointed impressions. And the errors will occur in that case because they are disjointed. And when you first start to remote view, you get a whole bunch of impressions, and you'll make the mistake of trying to put the impressions together. And that's where a lot of analytic overlay can happen. But if you're careful and don't let that mislead you, and you work in the way I'm saying, where you start directing yourself and you start sketching, then you're going to be able to really start to get an accurate depiction on your paper, a representation of what's there. And so you'll start to know where the water is. You'll start to know where the rectangular structure is, as opposed if it's important to know where the people are. Okay, I didn't get any people at number 2 here, but at number 3 I got people, and the people were doing certain activities over here. I might have gotten people here too. Let's say I got people over here too. But you know what? Over here, the people were in towers, and they seemed to be in a place of authority. Over here, the people seem to be in handcuffs or restraints, at least. Uh-oh, what's going on here? We have people in authority on one side and people in restraints on another side. Maybe even people were behind bars over here. Well, this is certainly an interesting location. I'm just making this up, by the way. I was starting to think of pyramids in Egypt, but I'm just pretending that I have a target here to explain things here. But so you might say, okay, well, really, this is nice. So you could describe locations, you could describe photographs, but what's really ultimately the purpose of this? I'm sure some of you are wondering this, because obviously this takes a lot of time and could involve a lot of practice, which it does. So what is the purpose of all of this? Well, what if I were to tell you that someone has been kidnapped, a baby has been kidnapped, and that baby obviously needs to be found, and they need to be found really fast. And so I'm going to hire you as a remote viewer, or if you're still learning, I might not hire you per se and pay you, but I'm going to ask you to help. And I may say, I want you to help find this baby. Well, and so you tune in and you get a sense of things going on at a location. You say, well, there's something triangular shape. It almost looks like a pyramid. I see people around. There's water around. Okay, that's great. You're getting great information. But I need more details than that. I need to know, this may be like a big, huge complex anywhere in the world. So I need you to get me there fast, and not just get me to the location. Let's say a baby was kidnapped in Disneyland, and the baby has just been kidnapped. Disneyland is a very big place. There are like 100,000 people there at any given time. Or I'm not, that might be a little high. I take that back, but there's thousands of people there at least on any given day. There is like miles of space, all different things. So it's great if you can describe Disneyland and, get me like, okay, the baby's been taken to Disneyland. But how am I going to find a baby in Disneyland if you don't give me a whole lot more description? So even if you describe some buildings in a lot of detail, I may need to know exactly where in the building this baby is being held. That is going to take a lot of description. And that's where remote viewing can come in, and knowing how to work with your paper and sessions and how to really hone in that minute details so that you can find missing people, kidnapped people, missing objects. That's where really getting into the fine details and being able to sketch more and more is going to be really helpful. Now, from the sketch that I'm doing right here, I'll just give you a quick example. And there's different ways to organize your paper so it looks a lot neater than this, but I won't go into all those right now. Hold on, you guys, just a second. Sorry, I just have to, hold on one moment. Okay, sorry about that. So, but what I will show you here is now that I've got this more information here, I'm going to keep this page. I'm not going to erase it. I'm not going to change it. But now that I just explored it by mapping things out here, I'm going to get out another piece of paper. I wouldn't be doing this on my computer. I'd be doing this by hand, but I'm just demonstrating here. And now I can do a more refined sketch, right? I got the triangle. Now I've got water here. Now I've got a building here. And in the building, there's a jail. Well, it looks like a jail. It may not be a jail, but at least, and that's the thing, maybe it's an AOL that it's a jail because there's people behind bars. Maybe it's something else. But at least whenever the person who's going to look for the missing baby has my sketch, and they're at the location, they look at my sketch here, and I had like a tower here, what I was calling a tower, and there were more people over here. See, this is my next sketch that's more refined, even though it's obviously not a great work of art here. But so maybe I got that there were these circles on here. Now I may be wrong in my analytic overlay, and initials for analytic overlay are AOL. So my analytic overlay was jail. That was not correct. If maybe it's like a cage for animals. Maybe my analytic overlay for this was pyramid, and it turns out it's not really a pyramid. I was wrong about that. I could be right about that. It could be a pyramid, but maybe it's not. Pyramid, I forget how to spell pyramid. But so have that up here. But somebody has let's say they're searchers. I was working for investigators, and I gave them just my sketch. I left off my AOLs, or maybe they were written somewhere, but they have my sketch. So they go to Disneyland and they're walking around, and oh my God, wait a second, there is they can't believe it. There's the triangle building with 3 round windows, and right next to it is a rectangular building, and there's no jail there, but there's metal bars that when they look at it, the first thing they think is that a jail? And it's like, no, that's not a jail. It's a cage, or it's decoration that looks like metal bars. And there's like a person right there. And right in front of the triangular building is a fountain. So even if I misidentified the words, which will sometimes happen, they can see it laid out in my sketches. As simple or as detailed as they are at this point are really proving to be very valuable. So this is where sketching can be very, very helpful. And it's not that different where that's why people like to use maps, not in remote viewing, but in everyday life. It's like I may not have the street names correct. And in remote viewing, a lot of times it's harder for people to come up with street names, although they may occasionally. But if I wanted to get you to my house, I could say, oh, well, I don't know the names of the streets, but, here you start off here and you go up a little ways, and then you turn right, and then you go left, and then you go right, and then you go this way, you go back this way. Here's a tree, a big tree, and then you're at my house. So people draw maps all the time in everyday life, and they're very, very useful. So essentially, that's what sketches can provide. For another reason sketches are so helpful in remote viewing, let's say that you have a remote viewing target, let's say someone wants to know, they want to test your abilities and see if you can describe a photograph that you're going to see next, which is also what we're about to do here. Well, you may again think that you are looking at a tree and it's not a tree, but you sketch something like this. This is exactly what happened to me recently. But I knew, even though my mind was focused on tree, I knew it wasn't a tree. So I had an image of a tree. I knew it was not a tree just because I've done so many sessions. What I sketched was, and I knew my mind was giving me the tree because it was trying to give me a shape. And so I sketched the shape, and it turned out that the shape that looked like this, it was the photo I was supposed to be describing was that of a tornado, and what do you call a tornado? The funnel cloud, and so it looked just like this. My mind was looking for a way to communicate, and that's the thing. Your minds, your subconscious is constantly, desperately seeking a way to give you a depiction of, especially in terms of photographs, it wants to give you a way to sketch the photo, and it will do that by any means. Unfortunately, in the process, it's like when someone is playing charades and they can't speak, the game of charades, which is where someone acts out what it is. Someone's written a word on a card, their team member acts it out, and then everyone has to guess what it is they're acting out. That's how, since our subconscious speaks in more of a primal language that bypasses the part of the brain that speaks in words that we're used to, it has to give us any way to communicate. And so in this case, for myself, it generated an analytic overlay of a tree. If I was a newer viewer, I might have been convinced I was looking at a tree. In this case, I knew, and sometimes if I do get an image of a tree, it is a tree. I can pretty much most of the time tell now, if I see a tree, is it really a tree or is it something like a tree? In this case, I knew it was like a tree, so I didn't get off track. But I sketched what was in my mind, and the picture matched very well what was on the piece of paper. If I can find it during the break, I'll show you that photograph. So anyway, this is why sketching, and then my picture was a very good match to the photograph. So this, and then if I had taken more time to describe the sketch again, you might say, okay, well, how do you get more detailed here? Well, again, I could probe this. I could say, I want to move towards whatever this shape is. And when I move towards it, it's windy. I get sucked into it. It's black and gray. And there's people taking pictures of it. If I move 100 feet over, maybe I didn't get any sense of people here, but when I gave myself the movement command, I'm going to move 100 meters away, I had a sense of a person who was looking through what seemed to be a camera, or actually I thought he was looking through a telescope, and he appeared tiny in the photograph. So I drew a tiny little person, and he's holding something that I thought was a camera. That was my analytic overlay. Or no, I thought it was a telescope that he was looking through, or binoculars. That was my analytic overlay. And in my paper, I actually wrote AOL, little person looking through binoculars. The binoculars were a AOL, as far as I could tell from the picture, because when I saw the picture later, the feedback photo, it was really a camera he was looking through. but he did appear this tiny size in the photo, which I'll show you in a little bit if I can find. So there was a person there. He was holding something. He was holding an object in order to look at something large nearby. And actually, he was standing by a car, which I didn't know it was a car. I think I thought it was no, I said it was a vehicle. It was a car, and he was standing by a car as well. So some of the things in a remote viewing session, you're going to get correct, and it's going to be exactly like it is. Other things you're going to misinterpret. And why do you misinterpret things? Well, if you happen to be outside and there was a tornado and you see someone standing there, it's very possible that you are going to confuse what he's holding. You're going to think he's holding a camera, but it's really a radio, or it's really binoculars. You might think it's a man, and then when you come, and this isn't in remote viewing, this is you're driving down the street. Suddenly you stop, you see something unexpected. You think there's a man there, but you come up closer and realize it's a woman wearing a hat. You thought he was driving a Chevy, but it turns out that he's driving a what's close to a Chevy. I don't know my cars well, but you think it's a Chevy, but it turns out to be a Toyota. Or you think that you're looking at you see a vehicle, and you naturally assume it's a car because it's on a road, and you get up closer and you realize it's a tiny airplane that someone had to do an emergency landing of. But you expected it to be a car because it was on the road, not an airplane. And so your mind just naturally thought it was going to be something. That's quite often what times happens in real life. You get closer to it, you have more time to study it, and you realize, wait a second, it's not this, it's that. How many times do you mistake in what you're seeing on TV or in your everyday life? You don't get all upset. You might laugh at yourself and think, oh, that's funny. I didn't expect that. But you don't get all upset with yourself. But so why in a session, when you misidentify something initially, do you get upset? In sessions, we're seeing things for such a split second, we're barely even seeing them, or not even seeing them at all. So that's why there's going to be errors. And the more you practice, the less errors you have. Okay, that being said, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to go right into a remote viewing session and spend the rest of the time remote viewing. Does anybody have any questions before we take our break? I will lead you through the first remote viewing session and give you instructions of what to do.
Yes, Deborah, excuse me.
Yes. Go ahead.
I have a question. Just in the beginning of the course, you said the government stops the research in remote viewing. I want to know why they stopped the research in remote viewing.
Yes. Well, they were unfunded. They lost their funding. They lost their funding
Mm,
um, because there were many people in the government who were completely opposed to having any kind of psychic program. These people were not simply opposed because they didn't believe in it. There was even, in fact, I'm trying to remember who, I think this was um, just Joe McMoneagle, who is considered one of he was in the military program for 20 years. Um, he is still around. I talk to him from time to time, and he'll be at a conference I'll be speaking at in a few months. Well, Joe talks about how he was at a meeting, and one of the generals, was either a general or senator, came up to him and he said, "You are doing the work of the devil." he was from a Christian background. There's many people from Christian backgrounds who think that any kind of psychic work is coming from the devil. So at an actual meeting, this guy came up and said, "You're doing the work of the devil," and he was one of the people that had a hand in funding them. And Joe gives the story of at the same meeting, after that guy stormed out of the room, he left the meeting. Another guy came up to him and said, "You are doing God's work because you're using your ability to save lives." So people had such vast different opinions about it, but there were many. They had to constantly, every single year, sometimes twice a year, they had to go and convince. Imagine going before the Senate, going before other people where you could barely get them to agree to fund any program, and now they're going to fund a psychic program. The other thing was that there was work coming out of the research unit. There was also all this work coming out of the military unit. A lot of the work was declassified. So when they would go before Congress, who was funding them, there was a lot that even they couldn't just give full reports of all the work they were doing and all the results. There was a lot. It wasn't easy for to share with every agency, what was going on. So they were very reliant on, let's say, the CIA, whoever was in charge of the CIA needed to report to Congress. And it sometimes over the 20 years, they had friends in the CIA. Whoever was running that was very open. In the end, I forget the name of the person that was the director of the CIA, but in the final year, the director of the CIA was very personally opposed. He was opposed, and also when the programs were defunded and declassified, they the the head of the CIA did not want the program to be declassified. And when the word started to come out, it was actually leaked to the media. And when it was leaked, he came on the news and essentially lied and said that the viewers had not been effective. But there were other reports. There were reports for years which, if they hadn't been effective, they wouldn't have gotten their funding after the first couple years. So there was all this infighting and political issues, but essentially, at least the programs that are known, they got disbanded. Now, people say, are there still programs going on? Of course, there could be, and probably are. It's just those programs that then were talked about and now have become part of history, are no longer going on. But there is very likely still programs going on that we just don't know about. Any other questions? Okay, then let's take our 10-minute break. When you come back, you're going to need to have paper. You should have plenty of white paper if possible. If you don't, just use what you have, but you don't tend to want to use lined paper. You want to have blank paper and a pen and a flat writing surface. So make sure during your break you get those and you're ready to go in 10 minutes. There's no music with this system. I'm just going to mute myself and I will be back in 10 minutes. All right. So we're going to get started again. I was looking for my session that I was talking about with the cyclone and tornado, where my sketch looked just like it, even though the picture came to me as a tree. But I'm not going to be able to find it right now. So anyway, it wasn't really that great of a rendition anyway. But so let's get started here. Hopefully you guys are all back. You know, if you're back, if you can just type back or that you're here in the chat window so that I know. I'll give you guys a minute here. All right. So we're going to get started with our first exercise. Okay, and I'm going to give this exercise a target number. But in some ways, the target number for this one isn't going to matter so much because I am going to give you a tasking with front loading. And what this is going to be, technically, this is considered an outbounder exercise. We can think of it as an experiment because we're experimenting to see what it is that you're going to be getting. And just wanted to remind you that I explained earlier that your job is to observe and describe and sketch and experience. What your job is not to do to is to know what it is you're looking at, is to name it. Now, you may end up doing that, and that's always great. But when you're doing a session, you don't want to be saying like, "Where am I? What is this?" Like the W's, the where, what. You don't really want to be doing that because your mind is just going to come up with it's going to generate things. So don't try to make sense. If you're observing is different than making sense of. It's different than being able to clear. I know exactly, where this is and what this is. So don't be so concerned about that, but just be in your observe mode. So getting back to what this is an outbounder exercise, and it's an outbounder. The outbounder is the person who goes out somewhere, and then you're going to hone in on that person and describe what's right around him. And so, okay, I'll write this down. So the person is my son, Manny. And so he has been instructed to go to a location. So Manny is at a location doing an activity. Describe the location where the activity is taking place. Um, and I would say stay close. Yeah, stay close to him. So you can imagine you can move yourself to next to him. You don't have to merge with him. Um, he's a You don't have to merge with him, but be next to him and notice what is right around him. What is he engaged with? What's going on there? What does it look like? What's the location like? Describe all of that. So that's going to be your task. And what I want everybody to do now, because this is front loading, front loading can sometimes help direct you, and other times it can kind of mess with your mind because your mind would be like, oh, where might Debra's son be right now? What might he be doing? What kinds of things, might he be doing? So, a teenager. So, that's going to just be things you have to get out of your mind because this has nothing to do with his age or anything like that. What he's doing. So already you could see that whatever your mind might be thinking, and activity can be anything. It just means there's action going on, or he's engaged with something at the location. And just let any preconceived notions that want to enter into your mind go away. Before you get started, so you want to restrain yourself. There's a couple of things you want to do before you get started. And at the very least, on your piece of paper, write your name in the upper right corner. So write your name. When you do, this would be just like the record keeping information for a session, but think of what's starting to happen right now, even as you're just doing a simple act like writing your name. You're starting to let your subconscious settle into the task. You're getting yourself prepared to be able to access the information. And as you're doing this, you write today's date, and you are going to be viewing him in real time. He's going to be somewhere right now. And so the date is just the date of the session, but just know that too, that you're whatever date and time it is for you, right now in real time, he's going to be doing something. But you write your date and write the start time. And know as you're writing this is information that could be helpful for someone later who looks at your session, but it's also preparing you. So you tell your subconscious, even though you're not consciously supposed to be tuning into the target yet, your subconscious is already getting busy. It's already moving from the whatever it was focused on, it's already moving to the target. You're just not going to consciously perceive information yet because you haven't given yourself permission to do that. It's kind of like your subconscious. Think of it like a dog. Like you're about to go take your dog for a walk, and you tell your dog to sit while you get its leash out and you get prepared. You're getting your shoes on. The dog really wants to start running over on the sidewalk so it could go have fun, but you're telling it, no, you're getting ready and it's got to restrain itself. But the dog is already starting to put its attention outside, and that is what you are. This, the dog is just an analogy of your subconscious. Okay, so name, date, start time. If you are getting any preconceived notions about the target, if you're thinking, oh, I know what this is, or maybe it's that, you want to let that go. Let that go. So you want to do your set asides, and a set aside is like grounding things out. And you can even use your grounding cord. Grounding is not part of remote viewing; it's part of clairvoyant training, but just release out of your space, out of your grounding cord, any distractors, and your set asides in controlled remote viewing methodology is where you put down whatever might be bothering you, whatever, if you have any visuals going on, those are called advanced visuals. that just because it's not time to view yet, just write down anything that might distract you right now on your piece of paper. If you're feeling nervous, if you're worried about how you're going to do, or even thinking, oh, can I do this? Put that down on your piece of paper and say, I'm setting this aside. I'm not going to let it bother me. I'm not going to let it distract me. And now I want you to just close your eyes. We're just going to do a little warm up exercise. And actually, I want you to, we're not going to do much of a warm up, just start to tune into your breathing. Slow down your breathing. Get relaxed. Let your mind just start to slip into that slower, deeper, receptive place where it's easy to access information. All right, so I want you to write down the target number that's connected to this on your piece of paper. Anyone coming in right now, we're just getting started. This is the target number, and this is outbounder exercise. You're going to describe, you could write this on your paper, like actually write the target number and describe location and activity connected with outbounder Manny Katz in present time. So write that on your paper, and know as you're writing this on the paper, you're already subconsciously connecting. And then what you can do, a few different things. You can just start to trace the number, the target number, with your pen. You can start to trace that number with your finger. Think of that number as a portal, and as you trace it with your pen or your finger, it's opening up. There's a signal line, and the signal line is taking you right over to Manny. Now, if you want, you can imagine you're traveling through it over to him, or you're extending your field. And then you're just going to stand right next to him and just relax, breathe, release any effort, and I'll be quiet here. You're going to have approximately 7 minutes to have your observations come in. And I just suggest initially, once you extend yourself over there, just relax and wait. And record your impressions. If there's anything you can sketch, you can move around I would say just stay pretty close to him, but you can move around like a meter or two, and if you want to do that as well. I'm going to let you do this pretty much on your own. Use all of your senses and just kind of play around with it. I'm going to put everyone on mute for about 5 minutes. Please proceed, and if you need anything, you could send a private chat to me. 5 minutes of silence. Get started now. And just make sure you're running through your senses, like you can use your smell. Just inhale through your nose. What smells do you smell? Listen, reach out. Let's take a couple more minutes. All right. So, why don't you end your session there? And what I'd like you to do at the bottom of your session is write session end and the time, which is 12:10 here, whatever time it is at your place. Excuse me. Okay, so I took a picture so I could give you some feedback, but just keep in mind that a picture is limited. You were tasked with describing the location itself. So the picture is just one of, many angles of what you could see there. So if we had more time, I'd love to hear what everyone got before or see what everyone got before I reveal where he was and what he was doing. But for the sake of time, because I'd like to fit in a couple more exercises, I'm just going to show you this, and then whoever wants to speak up, share any matches that you got, can do that. Now, I'm going to show you this picture, and you may notice something right away. And I made a mistake when I and I'll explain what my mistake was. It wasn't it was the kind of mistake that can happen that scientists would not be very happy about, but I'll explain that in a minute. But go ahead and well, this is for me to do. I'm going to show you this on my screen. So Manny was actually at home. So we're both at home in the same house. And I did walk over to take a photo, and I was like, oh no, they might see me taking a photo here. But so I did kind of enter in there for a second. But Manny was there, and he was creating a fire in our wood burning stove. And so he was getting the fire together. He kind of got the fire going a lot faster than I anticipated. So he pretty much got the fire, got wood in it, it got going. And then I told him, well, just hang out there. I'm going to show you my screen. So you should be able to start seeing this in a couple seconds here. So he's by the wood burning stove. It's very large. There's a little wood pile and a bucket next to it, wood floors and a sofa, a window right there. There's other rooms right around. It's inside of a big white house. If anyone went way up high and looked down, you would have noticed the house. But if you stayed near him, you may have noticed the hearth is stone. My dog is right there, and that was the mistake I made, and I didn't do it intentionally. But I realized I was probably being a little bit psychic there, where I was giving you an example when I was getting you started off with your piece of paper and saying write your name and the date. And I started to give you an example of your subconscious is like a dog and the dog's waiting for you. As I was doing that, I was like, why am I talking about a dog? And then when I walked in there, I was like, oh, great, my dog is in there. But a scientist or skeptic, if you got a dog in your session, it's very, very possible if anyone tuned into an animal, it was because you were being psychic and it was there. But given I had used that as an example, and that's actually what mentalists will do, they'll implant words. So, and then the audience will come up with the word and be like, oh my gosh, how did I know that? Or how did you know this? It's because it was implanted. So I actually demonstrated that even though I did not mean to. I didn't know my dog was there, though I do know that tends to be where I know my dog tends to sleep there. I didn't consciously try to plant something when I gave that example. I think I was just, my subconscious was doing something there. And so that's one reason why researchers will say, better not to give any front loading. Then there's no possibility of that. Just give a target number and just send the target number. Don't have a discussion up front. But anyway, I would love to hear, did anyone, the, I like the wood burning stove because fire is very active. It's bright. You may not have necessarily gotten fire, but maybe like a bright light or something. Did anybody pick up on anything that you'd like to share right now?
Hello, this is Katja. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So it's very interesting. My mind made a story out of it immediately because just by writing down the number, I saw a house and I had the feeling it's in the upper part of the house. And I thought it's too early and I wanted to get rid of that image, but I just got already fixated into it. And I saw a chimney smoking.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that like like a children's and I painted it like in a children's book when you just draw a house and the chimney is smoking.
Uh-huh.
And so I thought I'm hooked in a story and I wanted to get out of it, but I couldn't. And I looked further, and then my mind really made a story out of it. Because I think subconsciously I might have been thinking, what can a young guy be doing in an attic or, somewhere in the house up there? And so I sensed another person up there, but I thought it's a woman, not a dog. And then I saw a window on one side, but the angle is different. So now I can't really say. Can you tell me where's the door? Did you take the picture from the door, from the entrance door?
There's a door that is to the opposite side of the window. There's a door with stairs going down, so the house is just up a little bit on some stairs. And then
Uh-huh,
I mean, it's the house is ground level, but you get walk up some stairs to get into the front door. And
uh-huh,
then there's also a window like where I came in to take this picture. I took the picture like the last minute, a couple of minutes that you were doing the session. There's a window, there's like the dining area and a big window right behind me. So there's windows on either side of the room. Right.
windows. All right. I wasn't too sure. I had the feeling there would be light coming in, but just little light. I saw little light coming in. Now I see the curtains are closed, but my mind made out of it a little window, and in the picture actually it's bigger, the window. And then I saw some activity that he was doing, and because I had the story of he's in an attic and little windows, I thought he would be sorting out old stuff. Because I saw this like somebody looking through old LPs, records and stuff, and sorting it out, that movement, which could have been the movement with a fire, but I didn't associate it with fire. I was in that kind of frame. He's doing some work there, and I really had the feeling I'm in a movie, but that's what my mind did automatically. It's like somebody sorting out things to maybe sell them into the flea market, on the flea market or something like that.
Well,
That was it.
and so what's interesting is he was touching the wood, but he also has his iPhone with his music, and you can't really see from the
Oh,
picture,
I
but
forgot.
he's got his.
Sorry,
Okay.
I heard some music. Yeah.
Yes, he's got his headphones on. So
Oh,
he's listening to music. He was playing around with his phone, which he always does whenever I give him any work to do. He's always got his music going. And so he was doing that as well as with the wood. So I'm glad you shared that, Katja, because you had great impressions that were matches. You can see where you had analytic overlay where they weren't all correct, but even like with the wood, like older stuff or an attic, like even though maybe you got the attic because you started off feeling like you were high up, an attic still tends to be maybe like there's wood around and older, kind of dustier stuff. And So all these elements were correct. You just kind of got the story off. And that is exactly what tends to happen. And the more you
Can
do
I say one more thing? Sorry, Deborah. When I look at the sofa, I actually saw the same type of thing, but my mind made an armchair out of it. But that same pattern, but like half of the size of it.
uh-huh. Yeah, and that is exactly what will happen with a lot of this. And so if you had that all down and you were sketching and you took more time, then you could sometimes these things will get corrected. For example, let's say that you sketched something that you were saying was an armchair, but then you went and spent more time with it. Additional time would show you, oh, it's not as, it's longer than I thought it was, or wait a second, this isn't, it's not that, he's holding on to old stuff. He's actually got an electronic device in his hand because you see gears turning around. So that's where sometimes the longer and more time you spend exploring what you initially got, you start correcting those initial impressions. And by the time you turn in your session with a summary, you can have a lot more correct data. But that was fantastic. Anyone else would like to share before we move on? And feel free to type in the chat box too, you guys, if you just want to just type to some impressions. But just
Yes, Debra.
yes, go ahead.
Um, First, I see a mountain from outside, and one big mountain and some other small mountains, and there is a green yard. Then suddenly I see the house. The floor is like this picture. It's brown and it's from wood. And I try to see from 500 up in the sky to see the area. I see a train trail very close to the mountain. Also, I see I go down and to the house again. I see the stairs going down from the front door, and I visualize some grass full of water. Maybe it's raining and it's full of water, or it's but I see some grass with water. Also, I see some vents made of wood somewhere close to the house.
What was that
I see
what
yeah.
was the last thing you said close to the house?
Excuse me?
I missed the last sentence. What was
Yeah, I see the vents somewhere close to the house. I don't
okay.
I mean, and also every time I see the house, I see some people walking around, a lady walking around. Um, from outside the green yard, it's look like there is a party now. This is, I don't know. I mean, a group of people doing some party outside. I don't know. This is what I saw.
So, I can confirm that there is a mountain. It's far away, but you can see it from the house. From some of the windows, you can see the mountain range. And um, then we have a fence that surrounds the entire property, a chain link fence, and then there's also a white picket fence right near, like right outside the living room window where the front steps are. So that was all correct. The sounds like you got the wood. Sounds like you saw me on the inside. There's just me and my son home right now, and not sure if there probably isn't very many people outside. I mean, there might be down the street or something. There could be, people, not on our property, but, next door. But so a lot of those impressions were very correct. And like I said, there's a mountain, there's the train tracks aren't too far away. So that was great. Um, and if you had moved, right, and maybe spent, I don't know if you brought yourself right next to Manny. Like one of the things that I'll do when I have an exercise like this is I'll even go up and hug the person. So I'm touching the person. So I make sure that, and then I'll look even in the direction that they're looking in. So I make sure that not only am I getting the surroundings, but I'm very focused in on what they're doing, or what there is right very close up to them. Would anyone else like to share?
I have a question, Deborah. It's Amy.
Oh, go ahead.
So mine was like really weird, but I just was wondering how I can get rid of the analytic overlay, just because I had an image when you were talking and then I tried to get rid of it, but somehow my drawing and all the descriptions had a lot to do with it still. And I tried like basically running it down my grounding cord, and I put it on my paper and I tried sort of envisioning it like a piece of paper in my mind and just like basically throwing it away and like crumpling it up, but like it still sort of had a lot to do with my picture.
And what was it? What?
Well, it was basically like I just saw basically I saw him at a school talking to little boys like in gym clothes, almost like he was teaching them something. Like they were in a gym. I got like shiny wooden floors, like the screechy gym kind, and then I drew like long, almost like basketball court type stuff, but it sort of looks like your chimney, but it's like long and like I put buildings around, and then there's a door on the left with stairs, grassy area, and then there's people's homes in the street, and then I have a neighbor with walking a dog. But
Oh. Well, so the dog, is right there, so that's good, unless that was just in your mind because I brought it up. But so you were tuning into some things, and then yeah, so you may have been stuck on you thought that you were like in a gymnasium or something like that. It's just
well, soccer came up to me at first, like grassy area, like to play soccer, and I was like, what the hell? Like what? That's just weird. So I tried getting rid of it, and like obviously it has to do with sports and stuff, because like I drew like a grassy area and some nets and stuff too.
Yeah. So, that's just as you go along, you'll things like that you'll be able to let go of more and more. But it is hard. So the best you can do is like put you can write AOL. I tend to teach to separate out your AOLs from your descriptors. And so you can put them on the right side of your paper and write AOL and then write set aside. And then what will happen is if you are doing movement commands, for example, like you might have that going on and it may still be, playing with your mind. But um, when you hone in on your senses and then tell yourself you have to just get descriptors, like you're not, again, like a basketball field, a sports field, teaching, those are kind of what either would be called higher concepts or they could be AOLs, they're nouns, they're higher concepts. But what's contained in them, going to the descriptors of, well, there's a large area or there's a small area, or if you brought yourself and you weren't particularly focused here, but let's say you said I'm gonna start over. I'm going to let the stuff go. I'm going to bring myself to ground level. I'm going to go stand next to him and I'm going to look down at my feet. And what observations do I get when I look down? And then you go to like colors, like, okay, there's a brownish color and there's something, it feels hard under my feet, like a wood floor. Okay, I'm going to just like look out in front of me by a foot. I'm going to reach out and touch. What do I feel when I reach out and touch? As you start to bring your body into the scene and using your different senses and going for the descriptors, it doesn't matter, where you are. And then it's kind of like, again with clairvoyant reading where sometimes you might just be getting a whole bunch of images or not a whole lot, and I'm like, focus on the flower, like look at the different parts. And because it's almost like you can't just kind of make stuff up from, well, you can, but as you're focused on the parts, you actually start getting more of the connection. You start having really good sight contact. It's not that you're not still going to misinterpret some things, but you're going to be you're going to have a lot more accurate. And then after you do a whole bunch of sessions, you start learning like how to not do that as much. It is still possible to get derailed even after you've, done a ton of sessions. This is the biggest challenge of all for remote viewers. It just sounded like you weren't particularly, you were touching upon things, but you weren't really that well connected yet. And that is absolutely not a problem whatsoever. The other thing is that the front loading was really too intense, as far as like, again, you knew, it was a 17-year-old boy, my son. That's a lot of information for your mind. And it's good to know how that affects you. There's some people who would say, I don't want to do a session with any front loading. Don't tell me anything because of
Yeah, I do a lot better when I don't know anything. Like basically like when like last Monday when you were like the the location. I feel like I did really good on that one, but I feel like not this one.
Yeah, and that's okay. Everybody, I mean myself, I have some sessions that are just terrific. I'm like super impressed with myself. And others it's like, oh, that kind of sucked. I wasn't particularly tuned in. I did it really fast. You guys did this really fast, and so don't worry about that whatsoever. But it's good to do things and see. You wouldn't know that you don't work well with too much front loading until you do it. Um, okay, let us move on. If anybody, after class, or at least by tonight, I will have a section on our group page where you can post your notes or sessions from today to share with each other if you want. But let's go do one more. So I'm going to take this picture away. And I'll post this picture in the group page too. We're going to do another one now. Okay, and I want everyone to just ground yourselves for a minute and just release whatever thoughts you're having. And you're going to need to also take out a new piece of paper, brand new piece of paper. You don't want to write on the opposite side of what you just did. You want to always have a fresh, clean paper and only write on one side of the paper. And I am going to give you a location. And just hang on a second. I just need to get this ready. I'm going to stop showing my screen if I haven't already. I'm going to stop showing my screen for a second and just give me 1 minute. Just get yourself in a quiet space while I get ready. Okay, so I have a target for you. Now this is going to be a location. So again, on your new piece of paper, and I will be showing you a feedback photo. So you're going to tell yourself that you're going to go to the location of which you're going to see the feedback photo. And you're going to the exact time that the photo is taken. So write your name at the top of the paper. And then your date under that, today's date. And then today's time. And then you're going to do your set asides if anything is distracting you, bothering you, anything you're worried about, anything that you've already seen, which would be called an advanced visual. You could just set that aside. And this time in your session, if you get anything that might be an AOL, analytic overlay, write, just put it on the right-hand side of your page. Try to keep your descriptors to the left side. Descriptors would be colors, shapes, sizes, all your impressions, and then just put your AOLs on the far right side of the page. And after you might keep your pen kind of towards the left of your page, because it's like the left of your page is where your descriptors go. So if your pen's in the left side of the page, you're going to be less inclined to get AOLs. If that doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. But essentially, there's a location, and I'll give you the target number. So write the target number at the top of your page. The target number this time is 530271. And your task is to go right to the location and describe the location. And you'll have about 7 minutes for this. Feel free to move all around. Use all your senses. And remember, as what you can do is as you're seeing the target, as you write the target number 5302-71113, 5302-71113, just trace this with your finger or your pen. Imagine it's a portal, you're moving through it. On the other side is the exact location where you want to be. I'll give you some more instructions in a few minutes, but just get started on your own. I'm putting you all on mute, and if you need anything, just type in the chat box. Have fun. Why don't you go ahead and move to base level and describe? Just write on your paper base level. You might even draw that at the bottom of your paper. Write the words base level, put your pen on it, and send your consciousness there. And then another thing you could do, since a photo was taken of this, because I'm going to be showing it to you, go stand next to the photographer and write on your piece of paper first, write move next to photographer or stand next to photographer. And then all you need to do is just look where the photographer is looking or hold on to the photographer or look through their camera. And what do you see? Let's take a couple more minutes. Alrighty, and then why don't you start to wrap up? Now, here's one more thing you can do, and these are things I've come up with over the years. I call them like little tricks. On your paper, just try one more thing. On your paper, describe whatever is important that I missed. So just put that phrase on your paper, describe anything important that I missed. And then put your pen on those words or your finger and just notice what impressions come to you. All right. So why don't you end your session there? Moving through this quickly. You can do sessions in a minute to sometimes several hours or several days, depending on how much details you need. So at the end of your session, write session end and put that at the bottom right-hand corner of your page, session end. I will unmute everybody. And once you see your feedback photo, again, feel free just to type any impressions that you have into the chat box. Don't be shy. And I'm now going to show you my screen. The location was underwater, and there's several dolphins with some underwater plant life. And I'll show you the picture. So this is a underwater scene. I don't know the exact location. It looks rather shallow. Let's see, I'm hearing, who is that coming from? Okay, so compare your, now a lot of times what will happen for some people is initially they'll be like, oh, that didn't match. But if you look at each of your descriptors and then compare, you'll oftentimes find that you actually had a lot of descriptors. It just didn't necessarily match what you were seeing in your mind, although it could have very well matched what you saw in your mind. So I'd like to hear from a couple people who had some matches. Anybody?
Yes, Debra.
Go ahead.
Um, First impression, I got a blue color. Then I start to focus and I see sea. I realize it's a sea picture and the blue color all over the picture. Then I got some other, I see coast, but maybe because the picture is showing the ground of the sea. I don't know. And see other details, it's not in the picture, but my first impression is the blue color and it's a sea picture.
Oh, fantastic. That's, yeah. And obviously, that would be very important. The most important information is there's water. Now, you always have to, movement exercises can especially if you're trying to match the picture, you always have to be a little careful with moving up high. And again, I really tasked you with going to the location, so you don't have to just be describing what's in the photo. If you moved up, this doesn't look that deep. So if you moved up 100 feet, I'm not sure what's, and this is where it's not necessarily so fair to you guys because I don't know what's outside that water. I don't know, is there a boat right there? Is there, I have no idea what's outside the water. And so
Mhm.
if you moved yourself up above the location and saw some things, I can't confirm. But we could kind of assume there could be boats or ocean or I mean beaches or things like that. There's obviously a person around because someone had to take the photo, and that person had to either be, he could have been in a boat, or I don't know if he swam from the shore, but so but we have to assume that there's a person there. um okay, so the good job
And
there.
I see a white hat also. I see wearing a white hat.
So, so that may have been the person wearing like scuba gear or something, or you may have even tuned into
Yeah.
like the top of. So it's easy to. I sometimes mistake animals for people, so it's that's possible too. But you may have been describing the divers there. Well, thank you. Anyone else would like to share? Don't be shy, you guys. Even if you just got one or two things correct.
Yes, Deborah.
Yes,
Excuse me. I also saw water.
excellent.
Um, yeah, I saw water. I saw more from the outside. I wasn't in the water, but I was outside the water, and I saw sort of a big park, and there was grass around the water, and there's a boat, and there was a building to the side. I'm so curious to find out really what's around what's around that area. Um, I saw also some plant life, swampy area. Um, yeah, that's about
Excellent.
it.
That's great. You had water, you had some plant life. There's most likely boats. It sounds like you got, a lot of great stuff there. So that's terrific. And again, if I said only describe the photo, then I would expect you to have more of underneath, but I gave you free license to just, explore the location. Um,
Right. I also got it was sunny and it was outdoors. I did get that as well.
oh, excellent. And sunlight beaming down is a very important aspect of the photo, actually. too. So you could see the sunlight shining down. Excellent. Those are everything you just said there were great impressions. Um, Anybody else want to share?
Yes, this is Beatrice. Um, so all of a sudden I got the light blue color and the sense of depth. It was deep, in the sense that it was like a swimming pool or a pool, and then I had this it reminds me the shape of a Mediterranean Sea, a closed sea, and so I had also the sense of the on the top of the shape I have. It was like water was running, the sense of the flow of the water, and but it was quite. I had the sense of water, and it was very, very sunny. So um, I put it like now hell because for me it was like water without water because it was very, very sunny as well. And I also smelled salt, and I also had the feelings that there was a sense of longing for something, for food. And I also saw like pavements, little stones on the bottom. And from above, if I went from above of the picture, everything looks like a plastic material. The surface was like plastic, still blue. And yep, that's pretty much it. And yes, on the right of the right side of the shapes also, I had the feeling that there was a body with the energy of a horse. It was like someone or something that has a lot of energy, very powerful, very yes, uh, able to go at high speed.
Wow.
Yeah, things like that.
That that's terrific.
But
A lot of very um, detailed descriptors.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to see your session too. Like, again, I'll post in a section on the page if you want to post, like, your page, like, scan it or take a picture of it, and you can upload it into the system. That would be great. Um, okay, anybody else want to share?
Yeah, I did it's Kristen. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
I did a lot better. Yeah, I did a lot better when I got rid of my analytic overlays. They really crowded out the picture and all the details from the first session. So I tried to avoid doing that this time, and I got a lot of details. I also, like Beatrice, got a lot of horse energy, so I kept getting distracted. It was like there was a big, giant tank of water with horses in it. It was a funny image, but I got a lot of sand and cold water and waving grass and gray, the gray with bumps like a dolphin. But this happened in the last session too. A lot of my images are coming to me upside down. Like I got the wood burning stove last time. I had to read it as I did an analytic overlay. It looked like a sign to me, like with flashing lights in it. And it was the same thing with this. The whole thing was kind of upside down, and I'm not sure what my mind is doing when it's flipping these big, big impressions upside down.
Well, a couple things with that. Well, for one, this target, it's underwater and they can go upside down too. But it is very common for remote viewers to flip things either upside down or from left to right. I have a really good example of that. I can show that to you here while if someone else, but I'll see if I can pull it up in a minute. But that is very common. And it has to do with the way our brains work and the different parts of our brains. And essentially, it really gets into our cognitive perception and visual perception and the physiology of it because um, the way we process information is to take pieces and automatically put them together and arrange them. And things appear, it's kind of like when we're remote viewing, a lot of times we're deconstructing what we're observing. And this is all happening automatically, but the visual will get deconstructed and then reconstructed. And in the reconstructing of it, it's not correct in the same way of how we just perceive. So that's pretty normal. It has to do with your brain. Okay, does anyone
Okay.
hear what that sounds like you did great there. Anybody else? Now I want to show you what I'm talking about with the brain kind of messing with things. There's always a little bit of now. So that was your target. I'm just going to show you something here. And hopefully no one was tuning into what I'm going to show you here because this isn't the target. I'm just showing you an example of what happens. I'm taking you to a website that I created for this organization I work with called the Applied Precognition Project. It's a great organization that helps you get a lot of practice. You could see an upcoming conference that is going to include some of the people I was talking about from the former military programs and research programs. And I'll be speaking there too. And let's see, where is that page? There's me up there. But I want to show you this example. Okay, so here, if you can see my screen, this is how, this is Shane's session of where he just had to describe a photograph and it was a close-up of a light. Look at what he did here. He had the shapes drawn very well of the lamp, but look how it's constructed all that he has a square box and a round inside, but the round part he put on the outside and the little triangle areas that were on the inside went on the outside. So he's got the shapes very well. This lamp here, it has squares, circles, and again, kind of triangular. He's got all of that just beautifully. It's just all like the pieces are taken apart and arranged wrong. But even the round part that's supposed to be on the inside, he actually wrote inside but stuck the picture on the outside. So this is, even though we do our best, and he probably did this session pretty well. He tends to take more time with his sessions, but he probably didn't spend that much time on this. But my point here is that our minds, we're kind of up against the limitations of our minds and how they perceive things. So the first thing about that is that you have to not get too upset with yourself, because you want to do a good job and you don't want to have things incorrect. But it's almost like you, with remote viewing, you kind of have a faulty mechanism. It's not quite, your brain isn't quite working how you want it to. And so, really, as you guys can already see, I mean, how much time did we spend on all this? Not a lot. And you already were getting, I'm sure if you look through your sessions, everybody had at least a couple impressions correct in these last two ones, and some had a ton. So this does not take, it's not hard to get psychic impressions. It's just you're working against your own anatomy. And so you have to learn how to take what your brain does. It's almost like having a disability. You know, it's almost like a person where their body isn't working right and they need to compensate for it and learn how to work with it. That's what remote viewing is about in a way, is, you know, as you get more and more correct. And, you know, it would be nice if just every time you just got clear pictures exactly as they are. And again, that is possible. You can have that happen, but it doesn't always happen that way. And then you're working to correct things. And every single remote viewer, even the very best ones, this guy, Joe McMonigal, he's one of them, but I've seen his sessions. I've seen him do sessions in real time. Joe here. Um, I've seen him do sessions in real time, and he's an artist, so his sessions look beautiful, extremely, extremely detailed and impressive. But even him, he gets things off. You know, he's got analytic overlay, but they look really nice because his artwork is really good. Okay, so that is all for today. I'm gonna post this and last week's because I have more information. It will be repetitive with the history, but I do have more details. Um, so I just keep up your practice. I will also put a couple links on the group page that shows where you could do practice targets. So you could practice just like this by yourself. There's a couple websites that give you practice targets. Um, and so I will send you those links as well. Okay, you guys, I gotta run. Thank you very much for your attention. We will have one more class. We'll be back on the Maestro conference system with just the phone number and PIN back on the telephone. And so I'll see you guys all next week, and I'll be in touch before that. Have a wonderful New Year's, everybody. Thank you for your attention, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.